G'day, fans, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Talking Stuff. I tell you what, fans, it is so cold outside, it could freeze the pricks off a barbed wire fence. Mr. Aaron, what is the deal with this ridiculous cold temperatures we're having to go through at the moment?
It's been particularly nippy in the mornings. And I was saying before we started up, the shop has this wonderful reverse cycle system where it's freezing in winter and super hot in summer. So the best of both worlds, really. Actually, if the wars could talk, what we were talking about before the show, the wars would say, gee, these guys are nerds.
I was going to say if the walls could talk, and I thought I don't really know. I don't really want to listen to what they have to say because there would be some very controversial stuff coming out of that. But that's okay. It is all good. It is all groovy. It's a freezing cold night in Melbourne, but of course, and probably most of Australia. But of course, if you need something to warm up by, forget about putting your hands near the fire or something exciting like that. Just come and join us to talk about some sci-fi nerdy stuff because we are going to warm the cockles. Is that right? And in fact, even Russell's already here with us. Hiya! So, yes, which is a very, very groovy.
Do you know, Russell came into the shop once and asked me to warm his cockles, and I said I don't do that kind of thing.
That's not a service we supply, but we've been on air for 1 minute and 30 seconds, and already we're going to get ourselves black band. Oh my goodness gracious me! Very, very good. Guess what? Now, guess what, fans? Before we went on air, Aaron said to me he's just purchased something which is absolutely fantastic, and it's actually visible right behind his head. Lean a little bit to the right, and there it is. It is a rare. Other side, yes, June collectible. Fade Ralph fans, can you absolutely believe it? Now, of course, the thing is, not only does Aaron now have to run out and buy the only other 5 other action figures that still exist, that's 5, not 5,000 or 5 million or 500, just 5. But he's got himself some really cool stuff there because it's the only action figure, is right, Aaron, where you can actually milk a cat. Is that right?
I know. It doesn't actually mention it on the packet, but there is a little cat with a cat milking device on there. And you know what? It cost me so much. It stung.
Very, very good. Actually, that was when Sting actually finished his recording career. He wasn't Sting anymore. He was Stung. Absolutely love it. Anyway, we've got lots to talk about tonight. As always, there's plenty of things to cover off, which is very, very cool, very, very exciting. First thing I want to bring up, now some of this will bore the bejesus out of everybody, just one frame only. Tales of the Jedi, they're talking about for next year. They now announced that one of the stories that they're going to be having in the animated series for Star Wars is a backstory, an origin story for Baylan Skoll, who was the super cool dude from the Ahsoka series. And of course, Ray Stevenson, the actor who played him, has sadly passed away since then. But they're doing a backstory on Baylan Skoll, the character, because he was clearly in the Jedi before he turned into a nasty pasty. And I think that's due out next year. But I reckon that's actually kind of cool if you're a Star Wars fan, because he was a damn good character, and it'd be good to see what he was all about. What do you reckon?
Yeah, one of the things I do like, Disney doesn't have, well, I guess it has a hit and miss record with their sort of main series, but I do like the little ways they have done the Tales of the Jedi and the Tales of the Empire and fleshed out some of the characters that haven't had that opportunity because they're not the main characters in a series. So this will be really interesting to see.
Very good stuff. So I, for one, am kind of keen to see what they do with it. Now, this has just come up in the past. I think it's been around for a couple of weeks. It's sticking with the Star Wars thing. It's been popping up on the Facebook feeds everywhere. Everybody's going completely ape over it, but nobody actually seems to know what it is. And it's actually a thing, an exhibition, if you will, called the Fans Strike Back, occurring in Australia in 2024. Now, I had a chat to the some of the Star Wars dudes today, and what it looks like, it's an exhibition being put on regarding not pop culture, sort of toys and action figures and what do you call it, costumes and whatever else, regarding Star Wars. It's a privately run thing. According to the the advertising, it was in, yes, if you read at the bottom here, it was a smash hit in Paris. Go figure that. So have you heard of this at all? And any comments on it?
Yeah, I absolutely have. It was a big exhibition. I think it started in London, and I think basically what it is Spankin's house. For those who don't know, Dave Hankin is one of our friends who creates props and dioramas and does some really amazing artwork and has a mixture of replicas and even some real props. But this seems to be just merchandise and fan created props. I don't think there's actually any real props in there. It's only replicas. And what they've basically done is got some really amazing high end full size figures and half size models and things like that. And they've put a really amazing fan produced exhibition together. So if you look it up online, you can find some of it. There is some very impressive stuff there, but none of it is Lucasfilm sanctioned as far as I know.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were chatting with the Star Wars guys today and say, well, what is the deal with this? Can someone actually just buy a lot of collectibles, put on an exhibition and charge money for it and actually do it legally? Now, as it turns out, this thing has been in America, and there's actually a video available of the exhibition in the US, and I'll show that in a second. And it just seems unusual. It's like, well, it's just some random person who's just bought a lot of stuff and is putting on a show. So apparently it's on its way here. Based on what I read, it's going through all the cities as to how big it will be, what it will look like, how much it's going to cost to get in. Not entirely sure. And I like what Gavin said here about the statue with the clone trooper and the Yoda with the saber through the chest. I mean, that is particularly cool. But if you are interested in seeing more about what it's like, now this is actually from the actual Facebook page itself. If you can't read it, it says, wondering what it's all about. This is the Fan Strike Back exhibition. And I think they've intentionally used that name, Fan Strike Back, because they can't use Star Wars in the title. Thought I'd mention that. Coming to Melbourne late 2024. Want to get involved, fan collectors, costumers, obviously. Now accepting applications, as for what I don't know. Get in touch with us and blah, blah, blah. This icon down the bottom is actually from a video that you can find on YouTube where someone did a walkthrough of the exhibition. And so if you want to check it out, you can. I had a look today and I go, well, it's an interesting concept. And if it is legally allowed now, based on what I read and what I've heard, Lucasfilm are aware of it and Disney are aware of it, but they're kind of letting it go for now, which is rather surprising when you sit and think about it, because as we said in our discussions, if they're charging $2 or $5 a ticket, then that's not too bad. But if they get 20, 30,000 people turning up, that's bound to sort of like ring alarm bells somewhere. It's a bit like how Brickvention, the Lego exhibition, started off like this little tiny thing in this little tiny hall, and now the thing's a bloody behemoth because it just grew. So, yeah. I don't know.
I think it is one of those interesting things. I do think if they're showing merchandise and they're not saying that it's sanctioned by Lucasfilm, I think they can do it. It's like a museum that has a Darth Vader mask in or something. No one's going to go and tell them to take it out because it's not officially sanctioned by Lucasfilm. Yeah.
No, that's not the point. The point being that if they've got a Star Wars, it's not, they're not saying Star Wars, but it is Star Wars, and they're charging, money for people to enter, that's potentially where it gets a bit iffy. So anyway, it's coming to Australia apparently, and you can sign up for it apparently. So make of that what you will. We'll have to keep watching this space. But if it does turn out it's completely ridgy-dig and some dude says I've got all these high-end collectibles and I'm going to put on this show and people can come and it works, good on them. So, yeah,
well,
have to wait and see.
Then Spankin should charge entry to his place.
Yeah, that is interesting, isn't it? You'll have all these people going, oh, God, if it's that easy to do a show, I'll just do one myself. And based on the video that I saw, it actually looked quite good. They did actually have nice backdrops and whatever else and beautiful lighting and glass cases and whatever. Yeah. So we shall wait and see, which is very cool. I agree with you, Grant. It won't take Republic credits. Yes, very, very groovy. Good stuff. All right, so something else that popped up during the week. Now, this one I found was really, really interesting. They say Jonathan Frakes is now directing this new TV series. And I go, what the hell is it? And it's a thing called Venus Prime, right? Now, I tell you what, finding information on this is freaking hard. It's a series of books based on, as I've written it there just for my own references, Arthur C. Clarke. It doesn't even say when he wrote these. These were like really short stories written by Arthur C. Clarke, and Paul Proust expanded them out into 6 novels, right? And it's all based around this character called Sparta, the woman. And it's all this really exciting stuff. But I tell you what, finding information on this is really, really, really difficult. I've never heard of it up until the announcement. Do you know what Venus Prime is there, Mr. Aaron?
Until you told me it was being made, no. And I looked it up on Wikipedia, and there isn't even a full thing on it. It's just a little tag saying this is something to do with Arthur C. Clarke and another writer. I think Arthur C. Clarke has an introduction in some of the books and story credits on the other, but I had never really heard of it. Sounds interesting, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the funny thing. When you do a Wikipedia search and the thing doesn't even pop up at all, and you go, well, okay, that's not a good sign. But apparently, whatever it is, it's a TV series being produced. Sparta is the woman, is a sort of like she's a combination of technological advances and descendant of demigods, whatever that is. So all power to them. But I tell you what, when you go to the official site for Venus Prime, even that is pretty vague as to what it's all about. So
But
there
she
you go.
has amnesia.
She has amnesia. Yeah, she doesn't know who she is because the free spirits, hang on, that's got to read this up now. The free spirit bad guys suck the memory out of her head, just like milking a cat from a June collectible, and she's got no idea who she is. So go figure that one, kids. So yeah, there you go.
Russell's put up like some lyrics there. I remember Mr. Data had some lyrics in Star Trek Next Generation. There once was a woman from Venus whose body was shaped like a.
Very, very good. Absolutely love it. And to finish off, now normally I don't just put up pictures of sci-fi things because there's billions of them, like memes and this and that and that and this and merchandise and whatever. But this one I saw, and I thought I really like this one. Now I thought if you could give this to your grandmother, put her a cup of tea, her old what do you call it, the English breakfast in this particular cup, and get her to drink it down. I laughed my head off when I saw this. Now if you could cover the blood stains on the front here, right, and just make it look like a normal cup, and give her the old the Twinings tea in this cup, and get her to just go on. What do you reckon the reaction is going to be when you see that, dude?
I know another trick you can do in the cinema with a bucket of popcorn, but I won't talk about that here.
No, you won't. There you go. So what do you reckon of that? How do you reckon of that? Do they reckon it's grouse?
That looks really grouse, especially because it's got the red inside of the cup. I mean, you couldn't do it with a clear liquid, but if you did it with like something else, that'd be pretty cool if you were surprising someone.
I agree with Rusky Babes here. Put tomato soup in it. I reckon that's fantastic. Oh, I tell you what, that is just too cool for school in my opinion, which is a very, very groovy. So that's the news for the week, which is very exciting stuff. Now, of course, not everybody's seen this movie, and we're going to be talking about good old A Quiet Place Day One. I haven't seen it. Right, so there's going to be a spoiler alert. So if Aaron decides to drop the ball and saying the aliens invade the planet, oh my God, spoiler alert! Even I'm going to be spoiled. So, but Mr. Aaron, you went and saw A Quiet Place Day One, which was a really good first and second movie. For those who've never seen it, the whole Earth has been taken over by aliens, and you can't make noises anywhere. And most of the first two movies are in silence because they can't speak, they can't make noise. Fantastic concept, but you never really see the aliens. But this is the prequel to it.
Yeah, and I have to say, probably my views on this prequel will be a little bit jaded by probably one of the worst cinema experiences I've ever had.
Yeah.
So that like I was in gold class and all the food came wrong, and because it's a quiet place and you're trying to be quiet, you're talking anyway. But I do have to say, probably spoilers, out of the three movies, this was the weakest of the three. And when I watch a movie, first and foremost, I want to be entertained, and there was a lot of slow parts in this where I thought some of it was actually boring. And I think what could have been better, it fell into the stupid people doing stupid things. Like, really, if you were like doing stuff for your life and you knew that sound attracted things, you wouldn't be doing a lot of the things that these people did. But I would have preferred it having the Irwin Allen model, where you have a whole lot of people who were trying to get out, and one by one they were picked off. This had this really weird model where really it just concentrated on the main actress, and there were different people who kind of attached themselves to her through the movie. But what I really don't like, the first two movies I thought had guts. They killed a lot of people. They were graphic. They showed the monsters realistically. They set up the rules for the universe. They had sort of almost the 911 dust cloud come through, and you really couldn't see anything. There wasn't very much graphic stuff in this movie at all. It was more people being jumped and pulled off screen kind of thing. And the first movie as well did the thing where they actually killed children, which, look, I'm not into children getting killed, but you see that happen, you go, wow, that's serious when they kill children in a movie. In this movie, you didn't, although it was in the city and there's masses of people, you didn't actually see that much death in it. You saw people getting pulled aside, and I'm like, I wonder if you're going to see what they're doing to these people. And at one point, I did think, we're going to go down there and see what they're doing, but no, didn't really see it. The other thing, I would think you would agree, in the first two movies, the alien design is fantastic, and they used it sparingly. So when they did appear, it had, impact. And when you saw close-ups of them and they were listening, it was very, very tense and very, very well done. Where you have hordes of them in the city running all over the buildings, it really was let down by you see the aliens in full daylight all over the place, and they did look for me like poor CGI, especially when they're running all over the buildings and stuff. So there were bits, again, it's an interesting movie. You probably get some fun out of it if you want to go and see a popcorn movie, but it didn't seem to have the same level of excitement, ingenuity. I thought the first two were clever movies, and it didn't make sense into what they were doing. They knew the aliens are attracted to sound. They had helicopters over the city telling the people this, telling them to go to the docks because the aliens don't do water. Why don't you have the helicopters up one end of the city playing heavy metal music so that all the people can go to the docks without the aliens worrying about them? It was just really silly things like that. And they also set up scenarios where you're like, oh, this is going to happen. And then it didn't happen. So it disappoints the audience. And I'll give you one of them. They go into a bar where there's a piano with the lid up, and the woman fingers over the top of it, but obviously can't play it. But there's a cat walking around in the bar. Now, they could have done two things. They could have done the thing where the cat jumps on the piano and attracts the aliens, or you could have even maybe more clever. You see the cat go to jump on the piano, and just before there's any sound, someone grabs the jump. But they just didn't go there. And it was like you needed more action through the movie and you needed more events. So I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sort of review there. So just while you've been speaking, all this stuff has been popping up. So first things first, we've got a visitor from Ukraine again, which is absolutely awesome. So good to see. Hello, Ukraine. Hope things are going well over in that part of the planet, which is very cool. Karan saw it. He said he didn't mind it. 6 out of 10, which is only just barely like 60%, which is probably not that very, very groovy, which is a tad unfortunate. When we showed the picture of the alien, I like this. Mike said it was like a poor man's Venom. I guess it was to a large degree, because in the first two movies, you really didn't see the aliens at all. They were that fast. That's what I think made them scary, the fact you didn't really see them. So it's a fair call. Suddenly they're in your face. Gavin said your description of The Quiet Place like Final Jeopardy with Roger Thomas had a pathetic start, didn't get much further into Final Jeopardy. Oh, is that true? Have you seen Final Jeopardy? Is he on the right track on that one?
Yeah, it could be. I had a really bad experience in the cinema, just the cinema, so I wasn't really concentrating as much as I could be in the movie, but I would probably give it a 5 out of 10.
Fair enough. So, all right. So the key thing is, it's like, I guess, your Independence Day sort of things, because if there's an invasion, I mean, clearly there has to be something that invades, and I guess you can only hide the aliens for so long, and then later on it becomes the Quiet Place movies that we've seen. So I guess their hands were tied. I guess from a how did it all happen prequel concept, did it actually work? Did it at least explain what happened on the first day?
No. I actually
really?
prefer if this movie had not happened and just the snippets you saw on TV and what you heard in the first movies were what you knew about it, because they didn't actually explain anything. It was just meteors came down and aliens came out of them. You didn't even see that, though. You just saw the meteors and then there's aliens taking people out. And what I would have liked all through the movie is them actually learning stuff. So maybe see some battles and someone works out about the sound and someone works out about the water. But you didn't. You just got like stuff on the radio, basically giving plot exposition to the audience. So I thought it was a waste of time. I thought it could have been a whole lot more creative. So it was a good hour and a half popcorn movie, but don't think you're going to get like anything to the suspense and artistic as the first one particularly.
So I guess the key thing about the movie is that we all know how it ends, and that is for the humanity badly, right? Because obviously the other two movies, which are set, I can't remember how many years after the fact, a year, 2 years, I'm not entirely sure. But clearly it's not going to be, oh, no, we'll defeat this like a War of the Worlds. The aliens have arrived and we've defeated them within 2 hours. Clearly it has to end badly. And I guess by the sounds of it, it is one of those things that if you want to know the history, whether you like it or don't like it, at least it'll fill in supposedly those gaps. But as you said, if you want to remain ambiguous and go, you know what, I don't want to know what happened, don't watch it. So I guess that's where it comes down to, which is, it's a bit unfortunate because all invasions are identical. right? In the end, someone has to come into someone else's territory and start killing everything. Doesn't matter whether you're doing it with guns, viruses, whatever. It's the principle is exactly the same right across the board. So I guess if you're looking for something different, it's going to be quite hard. Yeah.
We are going to do a topic coming up one week. It's going to look at, do trailers give away too much? What movies have been ruined by their trailers? And this one I thought was one of those cheap trailers where they show a whole lot of action in the trailer, and if you like that action, there's no more of it in the movie. They basically, if you want to see the invasion, it's in the trailer. Like the main character gets knocked out and wakes up a day later and all the exciting stuff's happened. So I was really disappointed by that. If you're going to have half the trailers showing alien invasion, I want to see the school buses getting wrecked and the trucks going over and everyone. I don't want to see the wreckage the next day. And that's what they did. So I was pretty disappointed by that.
That's usually done as a budget conscious thing. Oh, we can't show knock out the protagonist. They wake up and it's all done. It's like going to a really good party. You have a few drinks, you fall asleep under a table, you wake up, the whole thing's finished. How to save money in a production. Hotline has said it makes it hard to understand when you talk. So if I say sorry, he's speaking slowly. I'm the one who speaks quickly, but I agree with what you understand. That's fine. Yeah, unfortunately, that's why I get him to do all the talking, because I just rattle everything off, and you're going to write back Hotline saying, what am I saying? Because even I don't know what I'm saying half the time. So I totally get it. So we do apologize for that. So it is all good fun. So the key thing is, though, fans, whether you see it or don't see it is entirely up to you. But if you haven't seen A Quiet Place parts 1 and 2, especially part 1, that is one movie you must see. It is absolutely spectacular, right? And if you're a woman and you've ever had kids before, trying to give birth without making noises and standing on nails, it is just like, it is intense stuff, and it's such a unique concept that is well worth looking at.
Sorry, that's the movie about Scientology.
There you go. Absolutely fantastic. I like that. The party comment. That was me in the 90s. Yes. Party. Very good. Anyway, that's A Quiet Place day 1. Check it out if you haven't done so already. Make up your own mind. Get back to us. And either you can say Aaron was on the ball, as Hotline did, or you can just say we're completely like talking through our bumhole. So there you go. With that in mind, we're going to move. Where did that come from? With that in mind,
do you think
what?
Do you think more people would watch if we did talk through our bum holes?
I sometimes feel I am. Oh my goodness. Where was I going with that? Unbelievable. All right. I've got to stop before I get myself into trouble again. All right. That's the end of that. Time to move on with something really, really important. It's this.
A question.
All right. So the question we have tonight for Mr. Aaron. Where we go on this show? Okay. And this is actually a little bit relevant to our topic of conversation later on. The comments are really flying through. Oh, dear.
I don't get paid enough for this.
I'm trying to be calm blue oceans. All right. We're going to move on. All right. So the question I'm going to ask you, anybody who watches the replay of the show and just jumps straight to this point, are going to be going, what the hell is going on here? Oh, dear. Now, that is an image you cannot unsee. Yeah, exactly right. All right. The question. All right. So this is for you, Mr. Aaron. Very good. Are there any films which should not be remade under any circumstances? And the reason, or where this is coming from, is that clearly in this modern day and age, films are being remade all the time, right? And there are some deem to be absolutely untouchable. Now, in a non-sci-fi pop culture sense, clearly good examples would be The Wizard of Oz. Never, ever remake that again. Gone with the Wind. Never remake that ever again. Citizen Kane. Do not touch that, even if your life depends upon it. Based on that rationale, getting back into the science fiction film of things. Now, they did break the rules by doing Dave the Earth Still, and that, of course, that didn't really work at all. So, in your opinion, are there any movies that you think should never ever be remade? Full stop.
Well, the absolute excellence of Return to the Blue Lagoon should never ever be touched. That should never be remade.
Freaking idiots!
But,
Speaking of bubbles,
no, I absolutely.
Get on with it.
Yeah, talking of speaking, but anyway, I I do think the one you put up there, Forbidden Planet, I don't think should ever be remade, because part of the charm of it is it was the forefront of science fiction movies in the era that it was made. If you look at something that was remade from that time, The Day the Earth Stood Still, some people I know do like the remake, but for me, it was of its era, and the actual presentation was like groundbreaking at the time and cutting edge on what the stories they were telling. So instantly you're behind the eight ball when you make a remake, because it's not cutting edge anymore. It's a remake. Now you can take iconic movies. I don't think the Back to the Future movies should ever be remade, because they're of their time. And the great thing about Back to the Future, when it was made in the 80s, the historical part was going back to the 50s. But when you watch it now, you've got to remember we're as far away from the 80s now as they were from the 50s. So it works as a kind of 80s time capsule. And by doing one now, you'd have to go back to the 80s, and you could never really capture like the 80s how it was originally in the first Back to the Future movie. Anyway, I'm sure studios will try and make anything if they can make money off of it. But I do think there are some movies can never be remade. People have asked me, should they remake the original Star Wars trilogy? And I don't think you could remake the originals, and anyone kind of like it or think it was better. And that said, they did bring out some scenes that were little 5-minute cartoons done in manga or anime style, and I thought they were really good. So I guess there's an argue for both sides. But I guess if you're saying, are there any movies that should never be remade? Yes, there are some that should never be touched.
All right, this one's a good one, actually. So I've just got to do this. Fun factoid, Russell has said the 1939 Wizard of Oz is actually the third version done, not counting the other books. Remakes of silent movies you can understand, and so I think the previous two were silent movies. A lot of silent movies got remade into sound movies. In fact, oh shit, I can't think of Maltese Falcon. I think was actually remade by Hitchcock or Cecil B. DeMille.
Yeah.
One of those movies that was originally made as a silent movie by one. Yeah, Ten Commandments. Cecil B. DeMille did 10 Commandments in silence, and then he remade it 10 or so years later himself as a sound movie.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you are right. We're sort of bending the rules a little bit on this one. We're talking about, not silent as talkies, but actual normal movies. There's a whole range of people that have come through on this one. And it's interesting to sort of see what people happen to think. So Christy has said Labyrinth and Princess Bride, anything that was done by Jim Henson. Jim Henson, that's a fair call, actually. Even Guy has said The Dark Crystal. Yes, I mean, they've done the sequel to The Dark Crystal, which was just gone blank. Rebel. No, not Rebel. I can't think what it's called. But I tend to agree. If someone said, oh, let's do a remake of the Jim Henson movies, you can almost bet your bottom dollar. They would say, let's do it CG with the Skeksis and the Mystics and whatever. And that would just be like absolutely criminal if they said that. I agree with Russell. If they were to do remake of Forbidden Planet, which is just the thought of it alone, is like, oh, you can't do that. It would just look like another Star Trek. I totally agree. Christy also mentioned E.T. E.T. really couldn't be done as a remake because the whole concept of an alien coming to Earth and being adopted by a kid. I mean, as it was, Mac and Me was made a year or two after. I think E.T. had followed a similar principle. So it's been done already. So I can't imagine it would work with an audience today. And it's a good point. So there are some you go, you know what, if they're going to do it, fair enough. Okay, we can kind of deal with it. But there are definitely others. Like you'd be sitting there thinking, would you try and remake the original Alien? I don't think it would even work. But someone would probably think, oh, we've gone so far with all the sequels. Let's just go back and redo it again. Here, go on.
Yeah, they've tried to remake the original Alien 5 or 6 times. It's called Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection.
Yeah, that's actually true. Guy has said The Last Starfighter. The Last Starfighter definitely wouldn't work because what made the film so popular in the 80s was the visual effects, which were cutting edge at the time. If you did it all now in a modern sense, the whole zero to hero concept of the teenage dude who eventually becomes savior of the universe effectively, that's been done multiple times. Remember, there's a difference between making a remake and it being successful versus making a remake and it just tanks, but it makes the dollars, if that makes sense. So some of them do end up making their money back, but they're critically panned as being totally unnecessary. And that's what drives a lot of these things being made in the first place. It's not because the world says we need a remake of this. It's like a Clockwork Orange. A Clockwork Orange is a science fiction movie because it's set in a dystopian future. Can you imagine anybody saying, let's remake a Clockwork Orange? I mean, that would never work. Same thing about doing a remake of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It just wouldn't happen. Nobody would do it. Even if you did say, let's make it 3001: A Space Odyssey, which is the name of one of the books. So you do wonder what the deal would be.
They'd change it and ruin it, and it'd be like they'd call it steampunk kumquat or something like that, and they'd ruin the whole concept. They can't help but, well, look, directors like to put their stamp on a movie, and often that's good. A Spielberg movie because of not just his name, but the action and the way it's shot. But sometimes if you get like a franchise, I always say this with like Superman, you don't want someone who says, I'm going to take this character and I'm going to do new and different things with it. I don't like the blue suit, I'm going to make it maroon. I don't like no, if you should respect the characters and you should not change it. And that's the trouble with a lot of the remakes, where they take, like, the thing with Hollywood these days, they don't say remake, they say it's a soft reboot, which
Yes.
kind of is like the Ghostbusters, where they go, we're going to do a soft reboot, but they're all going to be women and they're all going to have similar, and it doesn't actually respect the original material. And I think that's the thing with a lot of, when we talk about these movies, it isn't that we don't really want a remake, it's that we don't want a remake that ruins the memory of the first movie. If you can't do it better or as good, just don't do it.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you with the question in a second. Williams made a mention about Enemy Mine. We discussed that last week. It's a remake that's just like, well, we don't really know why they're doing it, but who cares? I mean, in the end, frankly, who cares, right? Logan's Run is the same, right? If they were to do a remake of Logan's Run, who would care? It's like, well, I wouldn't give a shit. It's like, yeah, good luck to them. So there are some you can go, whatever. And I think that's a good example of that. Close Encounters of the Third Kind, yeah, I don't think that would make a bit of a big deal. But the question I got for you is, you personally, now it was very funny, even where Shane made a mention of Doctor Who and the Daleks from 1963, I think it was, or thereabouts. What do you personally not want to see remade?
Well, there's things like I mentioned. I'd never want them to remake Back to the Future, or,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
could you imagine them remaking Empire Strikes Back? No. I guess, like Christy mentioned, you couldn't capture the magic of the original Princess Bride again. It's like, lightning in a bottle, as the term is said. There's quite a few movies like from my childhood, but it's more from my point of view. I mean, a lot of the time, my favorite movie is a good movie, not just because of the movie, because of who I saw it with, the emotions at the time, and things like that. And again, you can't capture that in remaking a movie. I often say with Doctor Who, I don't like the new Doctor Who as much as the classic, but that's because I'm an adult now and you can't watch those old movies through a child's eyes. So a lot of the time, I like to watch the new Doctor Who with my son Kale, because he gives me a much better readout of how it might be seen if I was his age. So sometimes, I might not like something, and he's like, that's fantastic. Or other times, I don't like something, he goes, yeah, that's really crap. So it is interesting. I think movies are personal to what time in our life we see them as well. I would have no trouble with them doing a big remake of Doctor Who and the Daleks, but I actually think the story's a bit too simplistic now for a movie. They'd have to change it and make it more complicated, just because it's a bit quaint. But yeah, what about you?
All
Are
right.
there any things you think should never be remade?
Yeah, there are. I'm going to rattle off. So William has said that Barbarella is also in the works. I did hear that. And Russell has said Barbarella could work, but more in using a new story, using the character. And I tend to agree. Before I answer your question, I'm going to throw you back this question. In the past 20 years, in the 21st century, is there anything off the top of your head that you say, don't remake that, even though they're still relatively new?
That's an interesting one. I mean, could you remake stuff like Inception? I don't think so. I think it's just one of those movies that is a one and done. It's a really amazing movie. If you try and remake it, there's nothing more you can say about it, and there's no way you can improve it. So there's some movies like that that stand out as something that I wouldn't want them to ever try and remake. We have so many superhero movies. I don't want to ever see another Origins of Superman or Origins of Spider-Man or anything
But you
like
will, because there's one coming up. But yeah.
so they would be ones I would say I don't want to see remakes of. And I guess all the Star Wars movies, they're never going to remake them. I don't think they should. But that's not because I think they're untouchable pieces of art.
I like this one from Gavin. Yeah, remake Titanic, but change the ending. Oh, the ship doesn't sink; it comes back up again. That was called Raise the Titanic. Murray has joined us from good old Twitch. I don't know who Murray is. Hi, guys. Aaron, is that Fade Mint on card in the background? I see. Yes, it is. Absolutely fantastic with the milk, with the cat milking accessory. Sorry, good. Go for it.
That was Murray who came in and sold me that figure.
Very, very cool, which is very, very groovy. To answer your question, so off the top of my head, and I really didn't sort of think this through for myself, but I would not want to see a remake of District 9. I don't want to see a remake of V for Vendetta. I don't want to see a remake, as we said, of Forbidden Planet, most definitely. I'm still a bit iffy about the fact that Metropolis is getting a reworking, and I'm not entirely sold on that one. Excuse me, and that's off the top of my head, because I think there are some movies that have come out in the 21st century, and I think they are absolutely just spectacular. Just don't touch them, and I think that's actually very, very important. But we will have a chat one day, fans, on remakes that actually were better than the original, and funnily enough, there were some good examples of that. So very, very groovy. And people still saying, where are we? Event Horizon. Yeah, I couldn't give a rat's ass about the movie. Absolutely despised it, so they could remake that a million times if they wanted to. I don't care. And hang on, what? It would have said Highlander. Yeah, Highlander, because they've already done sequels. Usually when movies get remade, we were talking about the first one, like there's only one of them to start with, as opposed to the multiple sequels, which we're going to be discussing very, very soon. And Murray's already loving the stream, I tell you. See, like Ghostbusters, we can't cross the streams because shit goes down. It's never a good thing. Is that right there, Mr. Aaron?
Yeah, we cross the streams and shit goes down and we talk out of our bum holes. This is a high benchmark for an episode indeed, isn't it?
That is exactly right. Anyway, so yes, we believe, yes, there are definitely movies out there that should never be remade under any circumstances. And what brought this topic up, on a slightly different aside, we were talking about movies in the store on Saturday about long distances between sequels when one movie's made and a sequel comes out decades later, which we will discuss in another episode. And I mentioned the movie that came out in 1915 called Birth of a Nation, one of the first big movies in Hollywood before Hollywood even really existed. And they did a remake of it, turns out, in 2015. Yet if you mention Birth of a Nation, no one ever remembers the 2015 version. They just remember the 1915 version. So there you go.
Oh, look,
very cool.
Gavin has actually brought up the original concept name we were going to call this show.
What, verbal diarrhea? Love the spelling too, by the way. Very, very cool. Well, based on that concept, right? And now that everybody's in the zone talking about remakes and reboots and blah, 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 this nicely segues into our next topic, which is, can a movie franchise have too many sequels? And I'm expecting a lot of people to pump out all these franchises where they've said, oh my God, what is the deal with these shows? Shooting out sequels left, right, and center. And before I get to you, I remember Steven Spielberg saying, I think in the early 1980s, and he said, it's on camera, this quote, he says, you make a movie, it makes money, you make more movies, all right? He did not paraphrase that by saying, you make a movie, it makes money, you make more movies, providing you've got a story to continue, right? In most cases, sequels come out because the film makes a shitload of money and the studios go, mate, I don't care what you pump out. You just get it out there as fast as you can. And off the top of my head, Matrix was a perfect example of that. Weren't those sequels absolute tripe, Mr. Aaron?
Well, it's really interesting that often a bad sequel makes more money than a good original movie, because the original movie is good. Everyone's so pumped for the sequel. And movie grosses are so front-ended. And by that, I mean, it makes all the money on the first couple of weeks. The reviews haven't really gone out to say this is crap. So I remember watching The Matrix 2 and going, this isn't as good as the first one. How come it's made squillions more dollars than the first one? Because it was running on the goodwill of the first movie. And then number 3, of course, like has the massive drop because not as many people are interested. But why they made the Matrix 4, I do not know.
I'm going to get you to scooch across a bit to your left or your right. Just set yourself up. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Are you comfortable like that? Yep, groovy.
Yep.
Shane has said this about Birth of a Nation. I absolutely love it. They can make the sequel to Birth of a Nation looking back in 2024, Death of a Nation. Yes, life in America is not exactly ideal at the moment.
Look, I totally have to disagree with Colin and Police Academy. I mean, anyone who's seen the first Police Academy, there were so many unanswered questions.
So Gavin has made a point about Godzilla movies. We're talking about specific sequels, okay? Godzilla was just a franchise. They make a movie and they make another movie with the monster and another movie with the monster, but it wasn't like there was an underlying story throughout the whole lot. There are plenty of examples of franchises. You were talking about Back to the Future earlier. They already had the 3 stories mapped out, right? It was all good. We have 1, 2, and 3. They all mesh together. The world is good, right? That's an example where you needed the 3 to tell the story, and there are plenty of examples where that occurs. What we're effectively talking about is when the first movie is so successful, someone says, oh my God, let's just pump out the sequels until the cows come home. And they just keep doing it until the franchise is effectively destroyed. And then someone will say, well, let's just reboot it, remake it, and then just continue on again. And that's what I'm referring to here. Yeah.
So, yeah, Karan has said the Jurassic Park movies and absolutely Jurassic World movies, they were purely done for money. I mean, the first Jurassic Park is an absolute classic, and you knew as soon as they did that, they were not going to leave it alone. And of course, Michael Crichton had done the second book, and they went and did that, and it was half as good as the first one, and then the third one was half as good as that. So you get the law of diminishing returns, but they couldn't let it be, could they? They had to bring it back and reboot it, or do the soft reboot. And it's sometimes better just to not go there. I mean, I think with Jurassic Park, imagine how that movie would be seen if it was just that one movie and they'd never made any more.
Yeah, you can clearly see they said, "Oh my God, we've got dinosaurs now." Well, mate, it's ching. It's like it's going to print its own money. But of course, once you got through the first couple of stories, you go, "Well, I can't have dinosaurs chasing people. I've done that 1,000,000 times. What else can you do?" So and that's an interesting one. And yeah, you can argue that they've had a few too many of them. Colin has mentioned the Terminator series. I've had a beef for the Terminator series for a long time now.
Yeah.
In another show. I've said, Terminator 3 was always going to be a tough ask after the spectacular Terminator 2. Then you come out with absolute rubbish like Genesis and Dark Fate and all that. And it was like, guys, you needed to stop, right? But someone said, no, we've got to keep making the money and just pump this stuff out. And even Emilia Clarke, who was in Terminator Dark Fate, or whichever one on the right-hand side, even she said it was bloody awful. Didn't want to do any sequels to it. So, and of course, the idea of some of the sequels and the reboots is to say we can start a whole franchise and continue on. But when you're starting to remake something that was so successful initially, it doesn't take a mind reader to say, guys, it is just not going to work. So, yeah, but that's a good example.
I think with the Terminator movies, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because if you do a Terminator movie, you want Arnold tracking down someone. But they've already done that, so you can never do it again. Yeah. But they try and put another twist on it and go, okay, we're going to do the Resistance in the future. And everyone's like, we just wanted a Terminator movie. So you can't get creative and change the formula, but you can't do the formula over and over. So you really can never create a satisfactory movie for anyone.
Two things. Chrissy said Harry Potter. No, I disagree because they already had the stories written out. They just had to adapt them for movies. So that's fine. It had a good run. But William's on the right track. Starship Troopers. Friggin' hell. What was the deal with that? Did you ever see Starship Troopers 2? It was utter garbage. Just like, what did you guys do? How can you wreck that?
It was total ass, wasn't it? They didn't even...
Bumholes again. We're back to bumholes again.
There's a theme, isn't there? But and the RoboCop one as well. RoboCop, a hard R-rated movie, goes to an MA movie, and then the last one's PG. Who's that gonna play to? They try and make a movie that's anyone in the family can see. But if you've already had an R-rated movie as the first one, parents aren't going to take the kids, and it's only going to disappoint people who want to see brains blown out, flesh melting, people ripped to shreds.
See, but they were good examples. both of those series where they said the story's complete. There's nothing more to do after the first movie. But
Yeah.
someone has said, no, we'll find a way. We'll invent a story. We'll create something. And it's okay to say, well, what happens the next day? But if it doesn't work, if it doesn't gel, now sometimes you can do the sequel, the direct sequel, and you can kind of get away with it. There's plenty of examples of that. Aliens is a good example. Batman Returns is a good example of that. Terminator 2 is a good example of that. But sometimes it's like, well, it was never meant to go beyond this. And there are plenty of examples where the directors have said, I'm not even going to do it because it was never meant to go in this direction. And as a result, they end up twisting and the basic narrative of the first movie and just effectively ruining it. And people just sit there scratching their heads going, what the hell is the deal with that? So,
Well, the one that
you're going.
the one, and Shane brought it up earlier. Why did they make a sequel or sequels to Highlander? That first movie ended. He is the one. He gets the prize.
Yeah.
He isn't immortal anymore. And there's really, it's almost the perfect movie, and it's even got Queen music. And then you get number 2 opens up, and they go, "It's time," and someone from another planet comes back, and the Highlander is not human, not a human anymore. Goes back to being immortal, and they have some cock and ball story, and you're just like, who wanted to do this? This is not a good idea. How did they convince Sean Connery to be in this?
Yeah, they dropped the money. That's what it was. It was like how when they put Michael Caine in Jaws 3,
4.
and it was just Jaws 4, was it? And he
Yeah.
said he had to miss out on the Oscars to work on it. And he said he never saw the movie because he heard it was terrible, but he saw the house that it built, and that was fantastic, and it was pretty funny.
It was he has the classic line in it: "Sharks come and sharks go."
As they do. Karan is talking about Predator. Predator was an interesting example of a franchise that kicked off. Predator 2 was so different to number 1. Depending on how you view it, it's not bad, but it doesn't stack up against the original. And then, of course, they went on to do all the Predator versus Alien movies and the Predator Requiem and Predators. It's like, how many times can you muck around with one word? Putting S's on the end and changing this and changing that. You do wonder. But once again, that was a scenario where that we've got no story. We have to invent something. And Predator 2 kind of worked, but kind of didn't in a lot of ways. So you do wonder what the deal was with that.
Well, the whole thing with Predator 2, they put the alien skull in it as a joke. And because they put in it, it just opened up. And I always thought one of the other skulls was the Rancor. Imagine if they'd done Predators in Star Wars universe.
Yes. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's where the Alien versus Predator thing came from. So some of those Predator movies, I can't imagine anybody saying, oh my God, like was mentioned by Shane just then, The Predator is like the greatest Predator movie ever made. If you ever sit somebody down and say, give me the best Predator film, they're always going to say number 1. Some things that never change. I don't know if there's a scenario where you can have a franchise of movies, sci-fi ones, not pop culture ones, and say, name the best of all these movies, and they pick number 6, or they pick movie number 4, as opposed to movie number 1. Now, Star Trek notwithstanding, because obviously the motion picture kind of didn't really kick things off on a high, there would be a lot of examples where people say 1 and or 2 are it, and that would be the go. So,
yeah.
Yes. Unbelievable. And that was, of course, that then, whenever you mention Predator, of course, you've got to mention Alien at the same time. Mate, I know you've actually made a point of saying that as far as you're concerned, Alien 3 does not exist. But sad, dude, it does exist, and it was it was like, what a.
I actually like Alien 3.
Yeah.
I don't hate it. Beyond Alien 3, I think they shouldn't have made any more. Alien 3, I do appreciate the art of Alien 3, and that movie was meant to depress people, and it was depressing. But it's one of those things where just Alien and Aliens, just Terminator and Terminator 2, and you'd have a better respect for the whole franchise as a whole. I don't, I say Alien and Aliens. I do like Alien 3. It's just no one else really does.
Well, it was rubbish. I mean, you look at Aliens, and then you followed up with Alien 3, and as we've discussed in the show, it was like they're trying to stand on the shoulders of giants. And there was not a single thing about Alien 3 that made it better than Aliens. Like nothing, zero. Like absolute goose eggs.
There is one, and this isn't really a good reason. If you watch if you watch the massive behind the scenes makings for all of the first 4 Aliens, which are on the Alien quadrilogy, the making of Alien 3 is one of the best makings of you ever see, because it was so terrible behind the scenes and stuff. But no, that does not make a movie good. But if you haven't seen it, it's worth watching, where everyone is frustrated with the studio and the
Yeah.
director and walk-offs and changes and stuff like that. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I like that one. The best thing about the movie, what makes it better than the previous movie, is the making of. Look, but yeah, and that's exactly right. And you think sometimes you got to learn from your mistakes. They go make a third movie that's complete rubbish. They go, oh yeah, what the hell? Let's just stop. Oh no, let's go ahead and make a fourth movie. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, you're killing me. Okay, William said, yeah, it's unfortunate because the franchise was on a skyrocketing trajectory, and it just brought it crashing to earth. And I can't imagine anybody walking out that cinema for Alien 3 going, oh my god, this is just magnificent. It's so disappointing. And then it was just a downward spiral, and it has never really come back. Even now, when they do things like Prometheus and Covenant, and Romulus is coming out, that magic is never going to get recaptured, no matter
Well,
what
it
they do.
is.
Even if you do like the new movies. Here you go. Sorry, dude.
Alien is a brutal watch. If you liked the characters from Aliens and you have Hicks has died, and they have to do an
Yeah.
autopsy on Newt and stuff like that, can appreciate, like, no one walked in thinking that was going to happen. In fact, I think one of the movie reboots they were going to try and do was everything after Aliens was just Ripley's dreams in hypersleep, so they could just get rid of all of that.
Yeah, Russell says agrees with you. Alien 3 was valid, but produced. Is actually an early version of Firefly because Josh Whedon, I think, worked on it or whatever else. But Alien 4, oh, dude's on a spaceship and they're being attacked by aliens. Oh, where have I seen that before? Oh my god. Anyway, I take garbage. But there are some, of course, we were talking about movies that have too many sequels, and of course, this one's had sequels and reboots. The old Planet of the Apes. The funny thing about Planet of the Apes, for those who don't know the history, they do the first movie in 1968. They do Beneath the Planet of the Apes straight after it, and they actually said, "That's it, we're done. We've finished the whole story. We've blown up the Earth." And then some wag says, let's go back in time and to contemporary time and put the apes into our society today, which is where Escape comes from. And that worked. So if you have anybody who talks about the Planet of the Apes movies, number 3 sits right alongside number 1. Forget number 2.
Yeah.
And it's actually a really good story because it actually does make you think what would happen if apes landed in society like our world today. And then, of course, from there you went from conquest to battle, and then you had the reboot movies and whatever else. So there are examples where the sequels do actually work. And it's funny because I actually watched Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes last night. I hadn't seen it for a long time. It's on Disney Plus. I'll give it a bill, right? Because for the most part, it's just been ignored and forgotten by everybody. But I didn't mind it, but I could see why it didn't work. And once, of course, they did the Rise, Dawn, War, and Kingdom, if you will, that series has kind of like found its feet again. But even they're at the risk of making too many films. With Kingdom, they kind of went further than they needed to. Sorry, dude, cut you off.
I was going to say, it is one of those examples of do you do sequels to stuff, because the interesting thing about Planet of the Apes is it's always, on a movie like that, it's always cheaper to make a sequel because you've got all the ape prosthetics and masks and costumes. So Planet of the Apes, they have a budget and then it's reduced for the second one, even though the first movie's successful. And then how can they reduce it again? Do you know what? We're not going to have Ape City. We're going to bring them to modern day Earth. So for the first 3, even though the budget was cut, they stayed sort of consistently high. And then I think it went off the cliff after that. And what we were talking about remakes, maybe the Tim Burton remake is too far removed from the original material for the fans who like the original to get anything out of it. They're like, oh, it's Planet of the Apes. And then they see it and they're like, this ain't Roddy McDowall in a dodgy mask. This is totally different. And you would think, it's quite brave to sort of then reboot it again. But I do think the modern reboot has a lot of merit. I think the first 3 were quite a good trilogy. And you're right. The latest one maybe is a bridge too far.
Yeah, in retrospect, you can say you didn't need the 4th one. And of course, they're now talking about continuing on with that storyline. Shane mentioned he liked the 2000 Planet of the Apes, Tim Burton's one. I agree with you. I thought, it's just a little too different. I mean, everybody loves the makeup effects and they look fantastic. And they do look fantastic, but the story's just a bit too radical. The moment Mark Wahlberg's character lands on the planet and he runs into the humans and they start speaking and go, hey, That's not right. They're supposed to be freaking mute because of the disease and shit. I know they're all chatting away and having a good old time. Oh, nope, that ain't going to work for me. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit too different. One thing, we're going to be finishing in about a few minutes' time. And of course, one of the ones that has billions of sequels is the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, freaking sequel after sequel, 30-something movies. And I think we've reached that point now. I think even like 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, 6 years ago, the movies, they could do no wrong. Now people are over them. Whenever they announce a new Marvel movie, people, oh Christ, not another one. I think their time is gone, dude. What do you reckon?
Here's a question for Russell to check up on quickly. Is that the one with the most sequels, or is it something like the Carry On movies or something like that? There wouldn't be many that the Marvel universe hasn't passed yet, would there?
No, I tend to agree with you. Karan's just hang on, I've lost the sorry. Karan, hang on, we've got my butt's working. Show. He's not working. Oh my god. I was going to say Karan. Oh, finally, MCU. Yuck. Oh, cop that if you don't mind, umpire. I mean, they're not all bad. There are some good ones, but there's just so many of them, and of course they're not in chronological order. You've got to watch them all over the place to sort of fit the timeline. Tell you what, that one got milked to death, and the superhero fatigue term. I don't think that's a term that even existed prior to the MCU even coming into play. So superhero fatigue, and I found the problem with a lot of those films is at the end, there's always blowing up cities and huge big scenes and planets getting destroyed and go, oh my God, I've seen this before already. Just give me some character development. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Murray said Apes 1 and 2, especially the Mego figures. Okay, so I assume 1, 2, and 3 is Rise, Dawn, and War. War is a bit of hard work, but Dawn is particularly spectacular for those who haven't seen it. Carry On made 31 movies. Okay, yeah. So, yes. At this rate, we'll be making Carry On up the. What would you call us? You and I.
Khyber. Carry On up.
Carry up
Khyber Pass.
Oh my God.
They already made it though.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly right. Absolutely fantastic. Some other series. Because we're due to finish, and I don't want to run over time. This one I know some people are going to be like throwing up their lunch over this. Good Avatar's now pumping them out left, right, and center. I assume this is going to be the case. There's one due out this year, which I don't think there is, but they've got sequels planned for our next 100 years. So if you like your water worlds and your Navis and whatever else, there's going to be plenty of Avatar movies coming out in the distant future. So 10 years from now, we'll be talking about all those bloody sequels. What do you reckon?
It is interesting. Avatar 2 was the movie no one really wanted to see, as far as I knew, as in we need this movie. And then when it came out, it was still one of the most massive movies ever. I don't know how that happened, but there you go. James Cameron, he can do no wrong.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people who just hadn't seen it, and then you look at the box office takings, it's like it's $1 billion place. Like, who was that? Who are those people? So, oh my God, Christie's over it. Blue puke. Oh, if you don't mind, umpire. But yeah, like it or not, they're on their way, and very good. Hotline still with us from Ukraine. Awesome. Yes, we're due to finish in a second, so sit tight there. Hotline. There you go.
Do you know how you get blue puke? It's from drinking too much blue milk.
I knew you were going to say that, actually. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Some other movies that have had a lot of sequels, whether you agree with them or not, of course, was the Mad Max movies. 1 and 2, great. Number 3, wasn't necessary. Then, of course, they jumped a decade or 3 and end up with Fury Road, now Furiosa. Could have probably stuck with 1 and 2. Yeah.
Number 3, we don't need another sequel.
That's exactly right. I loved Avatar. I saw Avatar in the cinema, and I had a mate of mine who was into filmmaking at the time, and he said, other movie makers are going to watch Avatar and go, how are we supposed to compete against this? It was just spectacular. Whether you like the story or not is irrelevant. From a visual perspective, it was just unbelievable. What do you reckon there, Mr. Aaron?
My thoughts of Avatar, do you remember it was one of the first movies to have that new 3D process, was people throwing up in the cinema. Because the 3D was so new and so different. I really liked Avatar. Do you know what? It was a good science fiction movie, and there are not a lot of science fiction movies that capture the public's imagination, and that had like a cult-like following. You would have people who wanted to live on Pandora and went and saw the movie 20 or 30 times. So that's why it made so much money.
Yeah. It was definitely a visual treat like we've never seen before. And of course, one franchise of movies that just will not stop. Freaking Transformers. Bloody hell. What is the deal with these freaking movies? They're pumping them out.
Well, that's the movie that was one and done. I liked Transformers, the first one, 8 out of 10, and that 2 points that I didn't like was the stupid comedy and uh, some of the characters, and they took those ones, and that's what they made the next movies out of. And I was like, all the stuff I didn't like from the first movie, they they concentrated on that. And they got rid of all the military and rid of all the hackers and all of that stuff. And I was just like, what are they doing? But you know what? If they've made 8 or 9 of them, my opinion must be wrong.
Yeah, they make the money. The story doesn't need it,
Yeah.
but it just keeps going, which is very,
I
very
remember
cool.
I remember watching Age of Extinction, the one with the Dinobots in the cinema, and it is just mind-numbing Transformers robots fighting in action. And I actually thought, how can I be bored in a movie where there's robots fighting for 2 hours straight? Like, this is my
Yeah.
childhood dream, but somehow it was boring for me.
Jeez, geez, you're a tough audience member to please. What can I say? That brings us to the end of the conversation. Don't run away yet, fans. Got something else to bring up. Okay, so sit tight. We're at 9 o'clock now. So if you haven't done so already, be sure to check out all the Sci-Fi Zone socials. There's a thing about Starship Troopers coming out next Tuesday, funnily enough. So be sure to check that out on YouTube. And of course, you've got Aaron's store. If you haven't done so already, like Murray did, go into it and buy stuff or sell him stuff, which is a very, very groovy, Mr. Aaron. What do you reckon?
Murray did both, so he's like one of our top customers ever. Yeah, we've had some interesting stuff come through this week about to actually put a Transformer collection out. That came in today. I got a big vintage collection of Star Wars. So the vintage collection is the modern stuff, like that looks like the old stuff, but it's all in star cases, which is really nice. So there's going to be a big Star Wars display going out the next couple of days as well. So if you're not doing anything over the weekend, pop in and say hi.
What's the worst that could happen, guys? The store is like a refrigerator at the moment, so cold inside, cold outside. What can I say? But the conversations are hot. That's the most important thing. I like this one from Murray. He took his girls to see Bumblebee. That was it, one and done for me. Bumblebee was at least a good one, that's for sure. Now, even though this is not sci-fi, I'm putting this up for a reason. So we talk about the Jaws movies. As you know, there's been billions and billions of them, and which is particularly cool. But the key thing is that someone has put together, because there was, remember the gag from, was it Back to the Future 2, where there was like millions of Jaws sequels? I'm just going to put a comment here that you guys will all see. It's a fake sort of trailer thing for Jaws, and it's actually very, very funny. If you've got a chance, be sure to check it out and have a bit of a laugh at that. And the idea that there are millions upon millions of Jaws sequels, which is very, very groovy. What do you reckon then, Mr. Aaron?
Just remember, Jaws 19, this time it's really, really personal.
Really personal. Yes, exactly right. And with that in mind, we're going to shove off for tonight. I hope you guys have enjoyed our conversations, whether you be in like Murray joining us for the first time or Hotline joining us from Ukraine, or you're just a regular viewer. Be sure to come back next week, because we've got something very, very exciting occurring next Tuesday, which we'll announce on Tuesday. So make sure you check us out for that. But otherwise, we'll see you all again next Thursday to talk more stuff. Is that right, Mr. Aaron?
Docky straps. Yes. Have a good night. Have a good
Docky Ockies, dude, not Docky straps.
It's a new one. I'm expanding the range.
Very good. And we are going to be talking about bubbles. All right. See you next week, guys. Have a good one.
Have a good night, guys. See you.
Bye-bye.